The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
I am Emily Swallow, also known as the Armorer on The Mandalorian. And I'm just giving a little shout out to the Secrets of Star Wars podcast because this is the way.
You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, episode 165.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Hi, everyone. I'm Angela Sealana, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away. From movies to books to TV shows and more, we are looking at the deeper themes and meanings found in Star Wars. Today, we're diving into the third and fourth episodes of Star Wars Visions Season 2. These are entitled In the Stars and I Am Your Mother. And our crew today consists of, first of all, the Padawan, Josh Beeghley. Hi, Josh.
Hello, hello.
And we have the artist herself, Kathryn Laffrey. Hi, Kathryn.
Hello.
Should I introduce you as the mother this time?
Oh, I am the mother this time for sure. I tried to promise my girls I wouldn't embarrass them, but it's gonna happen.
Well, we'll see about that. So before we dive in, we would like to take a brief moment to recognize and thank our heroes. Maybe some of you are mothers out there. We have the people who make this podcast possible, our patrons. Thank you very much to all of you, including and especially this week, Deborah F., Hayden S., Amanda H., Dave G., and Franklin P. And if you want to help StarQuest continue our mission, please consider becoming a patron like them at sqpn.com/give. All right, well, to start off, let's talk about In the Stars. So if you're like, oh my gosh, which one is that? I'll give you the official summary here. Two sisters who are the last of their kind fight for survival when Imperial forces discover them. So I thought this was a really cool story, animation style, and honestly shed a few tears myself. So what were your first impressions? I'll start with Josh here first.
It reminded me of like a Star Wars version of Avatar. Not the Dave Filoni Avatar, like the Disney water people, tree people Avatar.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought of when you said Avatar. So
okay, well, I know Kathryn likes the other Avatar. So.
Thank you for the clarification.
But yeah, it was a lot of this, I guess, I don't want to say idea, but like a lot of a connection to nature, and it's specifically like how they sort of stayed connected with their ancestors through some sort of like not afterlife, but like physical representation from nature. Or it just reminded me so much of how they did that. And as I was watching the new Avatar last night, it just sort of kept going through my mind that that's how it was.
Yeah. What about you, Kathryn?
I love the animation in this. I kept, it took me a couple watchings to stop watching the animation because it was so beautiful and to like really get into the story, which I love the story, and kind of had a Lilo and Stitch meets Moana kind of feel for me. Actually, and it took me all the way back to writing my first ever book when I was in 4th grade, because I had the main character going hunting to get his adult name, and when he killed an animal, the eyes became the stars. So,
cool.
So I was like in learning about where the stars came from. So it kind of made me flash back to my fun little drawings there.
That's awesome. Well, In the Stars is a stop motion animation work by Punk Robot Studio, based in the country of Chile. And at Star Wars Celebration, they had this really cool panel about Star Wars Vision Season 2. And I don't recall if it was there or in another interview, but I know that it was tied to Star Wars Celebration that the director of this episode, Gabriel Osorio, spoke about how the story was inspired by a true story that is known by the people who live in Tierra del Fuego, which is translated as Land of Fire, or you may know it as Patagonia. That's like the bottom tip of South America, if you need a geography refresher there. And he said that it was inspired by actually a very tragic, sad story of the real life genocide of a people called the Selknam, who were murdered by colonists that came into the end of the 19th century, early 20th century. And that event, unfortunately, sadly, is still very little known to people outside of that region. So he said, I felt a big responsibility to tell a story that reflected on the resistance and on the resilience and all the injustice that the original nations of Patagonia have to endure. So I was really struck by that they were using this episode to tell a story about families, about local history, so that they aren't lost. And I know that we've talked about that on previous episodes of our podcast. So I wanted to ask you guys, especially Kathryn, being an artist, like about, how you thought that learning about this, background, and just in general, how Punk Robot really felt that responsibility with their art and that responsibility of artists also to use their art for causes like that.
I thought they did an incredible job because the story was so beautifully done that you didn't have to know the background to enjoy it. So they gave it a good universal appeal. So there was a human story element that we all can relate to. And then to go and watch the behind the scenes footage that Disney has and to hear the story behind it and then to really, dive deep into it, it just made it even more appealing. And just even the tying in the water, not knowing about Chile's problem of, no one having their own private access to their own water, which I find shocking to me. I have my own well, so I have my own water. So it's kind of strange to not have your own water. I thought, wow, that was shocking to hear about. But again, just the universal appeal of the story. They made a beautiful story, and it's a lot like Catholic sacred art in a way. It has to have universal appeal across the board, so to speak. And I thought they hit this one out of the park. It was amazingly done.
Yeah, I think with one of the quotes that really struck me in the script was Koten said to Ticina, "Without the starlight, the paint will fade away." And it kind of reminded me of how in our art and our creations, if we don't infuse it with that sense of the spark of the divine, the gift that we've been given, in this case, that spark is represented by starlight. But without that, the paint will fade away. The ultimate meaning that we infuse into art will, fade away, because really, like, is it art? We have to infuse those truths that have been passed on to us by our ancestors and by our faith traditions, and all the things that are important as human beings. That's really what we express, right, in art. So he also noted in an interview on a podcast called Triad of the Force, which I shared with Josh and Kathryn as we were getting ready for this, about the water situation in Chile, that it's privatized. Water is owned by international companies, and it's not free, it's not public. So that was a major inspiration for why the Empire in the story took control of the planet's water. I was wondering what you guys also thought, like you said, Kathryn, not knowing about that background. what did it mean for you to watch the story unfold and see that water was being commodified? Like, what did you take away from that symbolism or meaning?
I mean, water is essential for life. So to have that being taken away from them, and then it tied into like a lot of different Star Wars stories and books and things where they go to different planets and there's one essential thing they're trying to take. You know, there's a cropland somewhere or there's a mineral somewhere else. And they just swoop in and say, we need this and we're taking it. And everyone's forced to work for them and give it to them or pushed aside or eliminated so that they can take it. Sadly, stuff like that still goes on today. And, you know, we're dealing with a crisis of farmland in our own state. So we're being taken away for mining rights and things like that. So it's a sad reality I think we all can relate to in some way. And I was really proud of them for making a really beautiful way of making the point. For me, I'd say they excelled where for me, Andor didn't hit it. It's like Andor was doing kind of the same thing, but it was a little more direct, where this was a beautiful story that had depth. And so that's what was special to me. It had that mysticism still. It had Star Wars still and a bit more.
Yeah. What about you, Josh? What did you pull from maybe that the symbolism in the story?
I feel like at least the overarching symbolism that the Empire is always this giant oppressing thing makes it really nice for, you know, this small group from Chile to be able to share their story as well into such a larger community and raise its own awareness. I'm not as much of a looking into symbols. That's the one thing I hated doing in English class. But I just loved seeing the art and having their own traditions and trying to keep it alive, being like the last of their people, and seeing that as something that they cherished most. Because it's also interesting to see that in the kids as well. I mean, they were very young, and how they are able to see that as important in keeping who they are rather than just kind of fading it away and just becoming, you know, just like another person with no culture, no background to them.
Yeah. So I do think that it was really cool to look at how they created the actual art. What I found out about that is that they mainly used digital 3D, and they made a mix of stop motion animation where they combined real backgrounds, real scale models, hand painted 3D scan models. And that helped to kind of add those kind of personal touches, the handmade touches. And they also scanned images of greenery that's native to their region to use for the environment that you saw. So Kathryn, what stood out to you in terms of, you know, how they captured the storytelling visually, and, you know, I don't know, how would you describe like the art style from, you know, your background?
It was definitely, you know, pulling out the naturalism. And I love the fact that in the behind the scenes story, they talked about going to, you know, these regions in Patagonia where you are literally in the middle of nowhere and you feel like you're not even on the same planet. That's I think what's been really fascinating about Star Wars all along is just these unusual environments. And then to add in all the little details. I mean, this is one of those shows where it's like I stop, freeze the frame. I just wanted to see all the little grasses, the little shells, and watching the mushroom open and close with the starlight was really neat because that's that symbolism of light that you get in Star Wars. And the hand painting. I mean, right away I was like going, wait a minute, those are all over the place. So I went online and looked up. I wanted a map of where all hand art is. And it was almost like seeing a little chain across the continents. And to see that I think they say now on record the oldest one is in Indonesia. And they believe that probably 25,000 years ago that there was definitely people going across the South Pacific back and forth, island by island, from New Zealand, Australia, Indonesia, all the way to South America. So it really made everything feel connected. And these, I guess, are some of the youngest images of the hands in the cave art kind of thing. So it was just fun to see, just like it's a global connection. And the hand is, I think it's a universal art. I mean, what kid hasn't traced their hand in class? Or, there's always some art that involves the hand, to know that it's hundreds and thousands of years old.
Yeah. And I think I saw that there's a UNESCO World Heritage Site in Chile that's called Cueva de las Manos, the Cave of the Hands. And that was like, local to them, that's what they, pulled from to be inspired by that art for the hand art. And I thought it was cool, like how stars and light were related in the story to our ancestors, right? Those that come before us. I also learned from watching more of that interview with the director that the Selknam people that were, murdered in the genocide, that they see the stars. That's part of their culture. They see that as directly connected to their ancestors. So, as Catholics, we may not have exactly that understanding, but for me, it was kind of like a visual connection of the halo. Halos around the saints, that my understanding is that it's meant to be almost like you're poking a hole into eternity and you're seeing the saint, right? And it's just that gold glow, that golden glow of divinity that is kind of peeking through into our reality, or however you want to say it. So that's kind of like a connection that I made.
Especially at the end with all the stars, it was like that cloud of witnesses. It really felt like all the saints are watching us.
Yes, absolutely. So what other themes or what other things really struck you about the story itself? We've talked a lot about the art, but I know that'll be kind of like intertwined in as we're talking about the story. So what did you guys think about the story, and what was very Star Wars to you, and was there anything that you felt was like new or different or fun, or what do you think, Josh?
I don't know. I like the story, but like before I even really heard about the whole director and his background on it, I saw it as just a big corporation taking over a small town and then just starting to dump its waste, and there's a lot of pollution. And so I saw that more as like the main concern, I guess, coming up through it, was this idea of just large companies then doing whatever without really any restraint, and it just causing harm to, these local people. I don't remember where I was going with that.
That's okay. That's a very valid point too.
It was also nice to just see, two simple people, and I mean, this is sort of a common theme throughout Star Wars too, of just a common folk, someone that we can relate to, being able to stand up against something like that to bring about a change and make it better for the future.
Yeah. Kathryn, what about you? How did the story touch you?
I love the sister aspect of it, and seeing the way that dynamic played out. Wasn't until like a recent watching that I realized that the little sister always had both of her eyes open. So she's full view, where the older sister always had half her face covered. Her hair was in her face until the very end, when she finally let her true self come forward and use the Force. And so it was neat to see that the younger sister always had full vision and full hope. So she was able to still see that beauty was important, where her older sister was shutting half of herself off to what was going on. And all she could do was think of survival instead of the full hope of overcoming.
Yeah, that's awesome. For me, I mean, definitely the sister thing. I'm an older sister, and so I can testify that sometimes the older sibling, especially older sister, we tend to want to kind of like be that mother figure. I know we're going to talk about a mother figure in the next one, but just letting that responsibility sort of drag you down sometimes. And I loved how Tachina, the little sister, she believed so much in her mother had this spiritual power, and she believed that she could have that power. Like, she had no doubt. And, Koten, the older sister, is the one that's burdened with responsibility. But ultimately, she comes to see, as you were saying, Kathryn, the belief that was powerful. The little sister's belief wasn't just for nothing, that it was what moved the older sister to act on her faith. And, children and younger people can really receive and pass on the power of faith in a powerful way, really impactful way. So, the legacy of our ancestors, our parents, the importance of young people. And I also picked up on how at the very beginning, when the little sister is using some of their last water to do the painting ritual, it reminded me of in scripture where St. Paul says, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes forth from the mouth of God. So, in other words, physical survival isn't the ultimate good, right? Like, there's this faith aspect, this belief aspect, the rituals of our beliefs that help us to kind of keep going, and so where would the older sister be without the younger sister to, keep them going in their struggle, right?
I love that the younger sister was like, I know Mama's there, even through the smoke. She had that true hope in believing in that which she could not see. And I thought she was the perfect example of hope.
I feel like just the youngest child in general is seen as someone who has the most hope. They're the most oblivious to what's going on around them, where they can sort of just think like that. And then, like how that older sibling then has to step up and be the person to take care and make sure they're safe.
Yeah. So it was awesome that, to see that, and to also, the moment that the older sister, Koten, she starts to use the force, and then you see Tachina's little hand next to her, outstretched and doing that same motion that their mother did, but almost seeing like that very simple gesture by both of them, and knowing that one of them had the power of the force in a visible way, and the other, I would say, had the power of the force like in an interior way, like in that belief way. That was really moving. I mean, it just moved me to tears to think about how there have been people in my life that have helped me to get to that point where I can pull certain things out of myself, that I need to be able to make a change, or to, just fulfill my calling, my vocation.
There was one other visual I wonder if either of you caught. The shape of their spiritual sacred remembrance stone and the shape of the Imperial factory.
No.
Do not remember what the factory looked like.
They were the same. So the stone had the two uprights and kind of like pyramided out. And same thing with the Imperial factory. At one point in time, they kind of showed them like one right after the other. And at first I was confused by that, going, why would the Empire copy this stone if they're just eliminated everybody? And then I was like, wait a minute, they didn't eliminate everybody right away. It almost feels like this was them like saying, we are greater than your ancestors. We came from the stars and we are greater than, and almost like trying to trump their remembrance stone and showing domination. I was like, wow, that's kind of like oppressive and sad, and the opposite of what the church does. If anybody gets the chance to listen to Father Mike Schmidt doing the Catechism a Year, so for today, June 14th, he talked about the integration and diversity of cultures within the Catholic faith. It's amazing. Highly recommend listening to it. I'm not even going to try to say what he said because I don't want to get it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think that reminds me of a lot of things, but thankfully we are at that point now in the church where we can be more welcoming of people integrating their culture into the practice of the faith, where unfortunately that hasn't always been the case. And I think just from my own experience of life and also studying history, I would say that it was the moments when the church aligned with the government, with the big empire, that that wasn't really the case. You know, that that cultural heritage was, you know, really downtrodden. So one of the things you were saying, though, about the shape of the sacredness and kind of showing that one is bigger than the other, I thought about in Jerusalem when you go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is the big, huge church that's built over the tomb of Christ and Mount Calvary, we have that site because the Romans came and built their own shrine to their Roman gods over the site of Mount Calvary and over the site of Christ's tomb, because Christians would go to those places continuously, and they wanted to show that they were more powerful than, you know, this Jesus guy and then the cult, you know, the people that were following him. And so thanks to them, we know for sure that those are the two places, right? And so that's one of the cool things that I've learned through my work, what I do in my ministry full time. So yeah, that's cool. So I also wanted to talk about the music. Being native to the Andes Mountains region, from what I understand, they used in the soundtrack a reed instrument called the cañas and a lute type of string instrument called charangos. So that really, I think that really added to the feeling of their culture as well, to when you're watching it. Anything else you guys wanted to mention about this one?
Oh, the question I was wondering is, does anyone think that the mother was trained as a Jedi? I wondered, it's like, did this culture have an understanding of the Jedi in the same way Ahsoka's culture did?
I saw it more as like the Lasat kind of like grandmother, if you remember from Rebels, of just an older, wiser person who's in tune with the Force through their own culture, and where it's not seen as just, you know, like the Jedi way. It's seen as this larger aspect of life, which I think is better, because, you know, whenever you look at all of the movies, you see the Force as this power that you can use, but it's a larger aspect, and I think Visions did a good job of showing it as that.
It did remind me of one book where they talked about Luke had to bail out of his X-Wing rather high up, and so he had to use the Force to kind of parachute down. Didn't land very well, but when he was on the ground, he had he could see the force coming out of all living things to him as like these little points of light to help him heal. And it made me think about that, seeing the little mushrooms and their little twinkle with the light and everything like that. So yeah, it had that kind of natural feel of the force.
Yeah, I don't know. I tend to agree with Josh's sort of interpretation, and whatever training or not that she had, like as far as the Jedi were concerned, maybe she was kind of like a medicine woman would be in an indigenous tribe, somebody who was recognized as like really important, and or maybe just that was use of the force was more common in their people. Who knows? It's kind of cool to think about. Okay, well, are we ready to move on to I Am Your Mother?
Yeah.
Okay, well, this one is maybe a little more fun. This is I'm Your Mother, which is Aardman Animations, the British studio that's known for Chicken Run, Wallace and Gromit, Shaun the Sheep. And so basically, Annie, the pilot in school, is embarrassed of her mother as she's going to flight academy, and they're having a family race. Doesn't tell her mom, and as we can see, they end up winning, but ultimately they win in their hearts. So Josh, what was your first impression of I'm Your Mother?
I don't know. So you see a lot of the different aspects of parenting and how you may see it as a parent versus how the child sees it. And I see that as sort of like that was the main thing I got out of it, was parents may see it as, oh, I'm trying to do what I can to do my best for you. But in actuality, it's not good for the child and it's hurting them, but you don't know that. And it takes, some crazy race and near-death experience to have that moment of bonding.
Kathryn?
Did you have an embarrassing near-death experience with your mom once, Josh?
No. Waiting for that part.
I loved seeing Wallace and Gromit style Star Wars. Oh my goodness. One of my favorite animation studios. I have loved their work since it first came out. And then the whole time I was like, why does this story remind me of something else? And it took me a little while and another watching. Does anybody remember? Josh, please tell me you watched on PBS Arthur? No?
Yeah.
Last time I remembered watching like any sort of Wallace and Gromit thing was whenever I was like really, really young. And until like you just mentioned it, it was like I haven't heard that in years.
But what about Arthur on PBS? It was a cartoon. I think he was like a mouse or something.
Arthur the
He was,
and he had a bunny rabbit friend and
Buster.
So one of the characters.
Now you're really bringing memories back.
I'm going old school on this one, and my girls are going to laugh at me, I'm sure. We used to always watch this, and one of the characters was Francine. And her dad was a garbage man, and there was Bring Your Parent to Work Day for careers. And she was so embarrassed to find that anyone would find out that her dad was a garbage man. And so it's like, oh my gosh, this is reminding me so much of that storyline, just the whole embarrassment of it all. And what was really funny is at the end of that episode, her dad talked about, oh, someday I'll be the garbage man in space when we go to Mars. Everybody's like, ooh, ah. So again, get the garbage man in space thing, but it was just so cute just to see this tie-in of nostalgia from when my daughters were really little and knowing that I have embarrassed them many, many times.
That's cool. I don't know if I've just been like in a mood, but I cried at the end of this one too. So good job, Star Wars Visions. You're really packing the punch there. But yeah, overall my impression was that it was fun. It really had that sense of humor that you would expect from the studio. And it was also, it had a tenderness to it, in terms of the relationship between Annie and her mom. But there were a lot of Easter eggs, and that was part of the fun of this one. So I don't know how many Easter eggs you guys caught, but a lot of times you had to almost like pause it and look in the background of the scenes.
There's so many layers.
I'm kind of curious what you guys ended up spotting in this episode. Jump right in.
Josh, what do you got?
I wasn't really looking for Easter eggs when I watched it. I was more so watching visions just for the stories.
Yeah.
Not really much of looking into, Easter eggs and old references.
Mm-hmm.
It was just me trying to appreciate the different art styles and different change of pace.
I can appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think, probably all of us caught Wedge Antilles, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he was right out there in the front. And actually, Dennis Lawson came back to voice Wedge, which is kind of cool.
Nice.
Kathryn, what did you catch anything?
One thing that stuck out with me, and I was like, why does this ship look so familiar? But I was thrown off by the fact that it was now black and red. And the obnoxious, what were they called? The Von whatevers. Their ship was like an evil Nubian racer.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, so they must have hung out with Palpatine's country club gang. I don't know. And their little like Darth Vader helmet hair. And I loved seeing on Annie's backpack, I think she had like what looked like a little R2-D2 keychain.
Oh, wow. I didn't notice that. That's so cool. Did you guys notice she had a Max Rebo stuffed animal in her bed?
Yes, I did.
And then when her mom was working, the visor that she had was like a Mandalorian style.
Mandalorian welding helmet.
Yeah. That was cool. That was very appropriate as well.
Oh, yeah.
And then some of the other ones that I caught were, like, I think when they're at the race, there's basically like a festival in the background, and there's some kind of fruit, and I want to say it's Melu runs from Rebels, but I'm not 100% sure.
Probably.
And then they had like, I think a gaffy stick in the background. There was some kid like carrying a balloon with a porg on it. The like antagonist student, she was when she was talking and kind of making fun of Annie's mom and their house or their ship. She was in this tent, and the tent was like this guy selling wood carvings of like porgs and banthas. And then she's talking about like, their ship being a porta potty. But when she's saying that, there's literally 3 porta potties in the background. There's a tall one for Wookiees. There's a regular like humanoid one. And then there's like this little short one for Jawas.
So I'm going to have to watch this one over and over again just for all that fun stuff.
Yeah. And I did see online a couple of cool things too. If you look at her posters in her room, there's one of Harrison Dula, and that was very intentional apparently. And then there's also one of the band from Vision Season 1. If you remember that, there was this band called Starwaver. So they have a poster of Starwaver. They have a poster of Wedge Antilles. And then one of the, just as a last one, there's a lot more, but as a last really cool one. So I read an interview with the director and the writer, and she said that they wanted to close the loop on how Maz Kanata got Luke's old lightsaber. And so there's this scene it's just like in the background, it's like passing, but there's this store with objects touched by Luke Skywalker, and it has his hand in there, and it has the lightsaber that he lost. And if you look closely, you can actually see Maz's hand like reaching up to steal it.
Oh my gosh. Now I got to watch this again. I missed that one.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So there's like a bunch of really cool, fun stuff in here. Is there anything like, I know this art style is very, it's very identifiable. It's very characteristic of Aardman Animations. But I mean, is there anything about that art style is there a reason why it says fun to us? Like why it just sort of telegraphs that to us off of the screen? Because I think that's just goes with their style of writing and, creating these stories. So I have to ask you, Kathryn, like, what is it about that? The way that they make the art, like, and the way that it looks. How is it that it just tells us that it's fun?
It feels like to me it's just everything's exaggerated. So it's like as if a child could actually make their toys come to life. It's like the way kids play with their toys. Everything's exaggerated. And I feel like that's what it is. It just takes you to childhood. Everything's just a little crazy. The way their mouths move is just hyper exaggerated. And I don't know, everything about it just has some fun, smooth, crazy line to it. It's just, I fall in love with it every time I see it. I want those toys. I'm sorry. Give me action figures of all of this.
Totally. Josh, what do you think about the visuals? Like, was there anything that really stood out to you from the art and the visual part of it?
I love it wasn't like entirely stop animation, but like the physical, like the more physical looking models, if that makes sense, is what I've loved about it. It seems like it's just like one of those old stop animation movies basically that you would watch. And it does remind me of something like Wallace and Gromit, now that I actually remember the name of the show. But it just reminds me a lot of those funny cartoonish ones that I used to watch a long time ago. And it just brings you back to, like, again, like those just happier times whenever you could sit and watch those things.
It's very Star Wars, isn't it? I mean, George Lucas wanted to make Star Wars for kids. He was inspired by, Saturday morning cartoon type of thing, and also just did a lot of things practically. So going back to the writer and director, she's actually Polish born, and she moved to the UK. And her name is Magdalena Osinska. I hope I said that correctly. She is a mother herself, and apparently the droid Z1 is based on her old pet, which she described as a sausage dog. So that makes total sense.
I love that droid.
Yeah, it was so cool, huh? Like a Slinky, right?
Retractable cord.
And she based the characters on her own mother and herself in the role of being a daughter, as well as the role of being a mom. So gotta ask, what did you think of their take on taking that line that everyone seems to remember, "No, I am your father," which actually, does he say that? Like, oh, he doesn't say, "Luke, I am your father." He says, "No, I am your father," right?
Right.
Yeah, I am your father. Yes.
So, yeah. So what did you think of them kind of putting it on its head and making this story about mothers and daughters?
Very relatable for me, both up and down generations. My mom was notorious for being the silly mom in the neighborhood. And if kids came over to the house, sometimes she would just put peanut butter on their nose. Why not? It's just or she'd say, "Okay, you can have a treat, but what does Santa Claus say?" And when my friend said "Merry Christmas," and she goes, "Well, you can't have a ho-ho then." So it's just goofy stuff like that. And then for me with my daughters, I have always been a goofy mom myself. Obviously, having a goofy mother helped with that. But I have done the, hey, you forgot your lunch. And for my second oldest daughter, she forgot something almost every day her senior year in high school. I did not go screaming into the school for her, but it became kind of fun and actually miss kind of that stuff now. And then my youngest daughter, as soon as she was probably in middle school, was like, Mom, do not ever sing or dance again. Even if you're in the car waiting to pick me up, please do not sing. It's like, but I love singing. She's like, it's embarrassing. Okay. And my poor oldest daughter, I had her on the hook for years telling her that there's a mother's handbook, which is why I have to embarrass her. And when she's 15, I have to do this. And when she's 16, I have to do that. And she's like, there's no such thing as a mother handbook. We went to a Catholic women's conference. On the table of books, there was actually one that was called the Mother's Handbook, and we lost it laughing hysterically. It's like, oh my gosh, there really is one.
That's hilarious.
So, yeah, sorry, girls, I'll embarrass you again, I'm sure.
Well, I'm really curious what Josh pulled away from the story and not being a mother or a daughter, but certainly having had a mother.
Yeah. I don't know. It was weird because I could relate to both of the children with each of their parents and how they were treated. You know, you could see it as both. At times, you know, your mom can be this fun, outgoing person, but then she can also be this person who's on your butt about everything and making sure that you are going to be like the best person you can. They both still want like the same end goal for you. But it was interesting to just see myself in their shoes and just bouncing back and forth. And obviously they got the resolution, but I mean, not everybody does. And I mean, that's part of the sad part about also some kids today is, you know, they don't get that happy ending. And there are plenty of kids that I've even had to meet and talk to who don't get the chance to have, you know, happy parents, and they have to figure it all out on their own. But it isn't the worst thing to have parents like that, but it's also not the best. But, you know, you make the best of your situation, and, you know, at the end of the day, you do what's best to get you to that finish line.
Yeah. That's so true. And I'm glad you brought that up, Josh, because that definitely was not a part of my my initial interpretation. But that's definitely, yeah, that's I guess you could say that this story does show the power of a parent, right? Like the power that an impact that a parent can have on their children. And for me, that I mentioned that I was teary-eyed at the end because of how ultimately the things that may embarrass us about our parents, actually as we get older, we may end up adopting those whatever, you know, behavioral quirks or whatever it is, and becoming more like our parents. I thought it was really awesome that Annie ended up winning the race with the Ryloth role that she learned from her mom, and that her mom believed in her. And that was, you know, that was something that they had a connection that they had from a very early age in Annie's life. So just how awesome that parents really can be for their children, and what we learn from our parents, for better, for worse, but also sometimes just for weird. So yeah, those are some of the things that I pulled away. Anything else you guys want to talk about with I'm Your Mother?
I'm definitely watching it again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
More attention to the background.
There's so much.
It would be a great series. I would just love to see them do like a 10-episode arc with that style. It would be so much fun.
Yeah, like a Tales of the Jedi version of these Star Wars visions, where you could like get a little bit more about each character.
Yeah, that would be so fun. And honestly, like, I think this one or both of these that we talked about today, I would love to see more stories in those styles and with those characters. So yeah, we definitely had some fun with these episodes, some interesting thoughts. We want to know what all of you thought about these episodes. Send us your feedback. We'd love to hear your interpretations, the themes you pulled away, anything else you have to say about the art styles. So send us your feedback. Any question or comment about Star Wars is also welcome. And if you're interested in joining over 750 other fans of this show and other Star Quest shows in our online community, just go to sqpn.com/discord to join us on our Discord server. Or if you prefer to be a little more old school, quote unquote, you can email us, starwars@sqpn.com. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia and leave a comment there. You can also tweet us at SQPN. And don't miss our continued deep dive of Star Wars Visions as we continue to take a look at Season 2 Star Wars stories from these awesome animation studios around the world. You can subscribe to Secrets of Star Wars in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or find us on the SQPN YouTube channel. And if you want to find our previous episodes on the web, you can go to sqpn.com/Star Wars. Well, until next time, Josh Beeghley, thank you for joining our crew today.
Always happy to join.
And Kathryn Laffrey, thank you so much for being the resident mom on the panel today.
Thank you so much. It was great.
And once again, I'm the one in the middle, the Bendu, Angela Sealana. Thank you for listening to Secrets of Star Wars on Star Quest.
Here's another show on the Star Quest Network you're sure to enjoy. PlayStation Portable. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at starquest.fm/PSP.